Hello.
Welcome to 2022. It's February already.
We missed a bit.
We did. We decided to take a bit of a break over the winter period because naturally everything quietens down. But we have been recording some stuff with guests, which we're going to start releasing from Friday onwards anyway. So we'll explain a bit about that later. But what have we been up to really over this time of year?
So quite a lot then, really, relatively speaking. So we've been sort of putting in place some stuff we're doing with our racing drivers.
Yeah.
So working with one guy we've been working all over winter, haven't we? He's done quite a few days with us, which is good.
Yeah. No, it's just this time of year. It's kind of more planning and prep, ready for the season to start. Of course, track days in general, they sort of quieten down a bit because of weather and so on. So it's a great time, first of all, just have a bit of a break, but then recuperate and get back to it really. So that's what we've been doing. So yeah, been busy with racing drivers. We've got a few people signed up for this year, which is exciting. Also, we've done a number of other things. So we've developed a couple of new courses, haven't we?
Yeah, so the website's been updated, so that's all on there with that stuff.
Yeah.
So a couple of new courses. One we can't announce yet because we're still waiting for some information on it.
Let's just say it's going to be a more advanced car control course.
Yes.
So we get all the time people wanting to develop their car control, and even though we use a number of facilities for that, we wanted to do more faster pace car control, because what we do find when training people is when they do it at slower speed, great, but then when you add speed to the mix, it changes the emotions, and then of course you can end up with a different result. So so that's what we've really been working on. So it's pretty much ready to go. We've just got to sort some dates out. So if anybody's interested in that, have a look at the website or get in touch with us and we can explain more about that. So yeah, we've been doing that, things that are more one-to-one isolated stuff as well, haven't we, for people. But we've also finished off a couple of tours for this year. Now, we were going to do tours a few years ago, and then of course COVID hit, and we thought, okay, let's just hold it for now with everything going on. But we've had a lot of people inquiring about the Stelvio tour, so we've decided to go ahead with that this year, and we're also going to do a Scotland tour as well in the UK. And then next year it will evolve from there. So that's going to incorporate coaching, so we'll be on that as well. Really just trying to make obviously a great holiday of it, some great driving roads, but incorporate a bit of driving technique at the same time really. So that's what we've decided to do there, which would be good. We've got loads of things going on. We're going to be building, we're pretty much there, but a racing school. An academy, so lots of things that we'll update you on as we go really, but yeah, lots of exciting stuff on the way. So if we move on talking about exciting stuff, road cars. Exciting road cars, may I add.
And you probably remember, those are the regular watchers and listeners, that we were lucky enough to spot the Gordon Murray Automotive T50 tested at Millbrook and hear it running full chat.
So it was the first week, wasn't it? He was driving that.
It was the first time they'd run the engine full chat. So we've got a bit of a soft spot for what Gordon Murray's doing with these T50.
Well, it's old school in a way, but with modern technology, and that's what I kind of love about that. He's kept very much to his roots, kept it simple, but it isn't like a 60s car or something like that, is it? It's still got modern technology to it. So it's very small, very light. But yeah, sorry, don't carry on. I'll start talking about it otherwise.
So obviously he's announced that he's going to do a smaller version. I say smaller, it's not a big car to start with. A baby brother to the T50, which is called the T33.
So
whether that's going to do with Alfa Romeos, I don't know, because I know he likes his old stuff.
Well, maybe. So it's still going to be a V12, isn't it?
So same engine.
But there's less power. A little bit less aero. It's not going to have the rear mounted fan on it either, which is kind of one of the big features of the T50. But there's still only going to be 100 made, so I'm sure already most of them have probably sold.
I think I read somewhere that they are. So when the press release came out, he'd sold half of them. I think he's sold them all. I think they're all gone now.
Well, it's in a way it's a good investment, isn't it? If you've got the money, something like that's only going to appreciate more and more, just like the T50, because there's so many people out there that love cars that want something a bit more traditional, but don't necessarily want to go and get an older car because they want those modern touches to it, and that's really what he's doing, isn't it? So
he is. So it's a bit more conventional. So it's not got a centre seat. It's a two-seater rather than a centre seat like the T50 is. And it's got lots of styling cues. So he said it's not a retro car, but it has got lots of styling cues from old stuff. Like it's got two round rear lights and stuff like a Ferrari, and
well, he
like
said
front off a Lotus and things like that.
Because he said, didn't he? He said about how he'd wanted to kind of pick cars from the racing scene in the 1960s and bring that in and merge it with modern technology, and that's really his inspiration for the T50 and this model as well. So when does it actually launch? I know they've sold, but when will we see it?
Yeah, I don't really know, because we don't know when the T50 is coming out either. I think it's one of those things, they're all sold, so that they'll be ready when they're ready.
Well, the last time we were at Millbrook, there was a T50 going around there. It seems to be out every day at the moment, isn't it? Doing testing and fine. Yeah, exactly. I guess that's exactly it. Put miles on it, make sure everything as it should be. But so have a little look at that. I mean, respect if you can get one, but
well, the 1.3 million.
Yeah, exactly. Plus taxes and everything else. So it's even more than that. So which is a bit mad. But no, so it'd be really nice to see it. Hopefully we'll get to see it anyway. Unfortunately, we won't be able to share any footage of it because at Millbrook you can't. But
if you do a driving course with us at Millbrook, you might see it and hear it.
Yeah, that's probably not the main incentive to come on one of our courses, but it might be a perk.
Well, last time we were there, we went to try and see it. It's like a mythical beast. You could hear it, but you couldn't see it.
Yeah, so one of our clients, he was in awe of it. So we went down to have a look at it at the bowl, and it came in, or was just doing very low speed.
Yeah, it's trundling around, wasn't it?
Unfortunately. But hey, it's still an experience, isn't it? So moving on to driving, we thought this week we'd talk a bit more about sim coaching, because obviously we've done all sorts of topics in the past, but we really try and merge the sim side with the real life side. So this isn't really talking about people that are trying to get into sim racing necessarily. This is really for anybody who is doing track days, into driving, and wants to develop further. Then a great way is use a sim, because it's very cost effective. You can get hours and hours of miles under your belt, more so than you ever can in real life. So it's it's very useful, isn't it?
It is. Well, one particular client, we've done a couple of days with him now, and he came on leaps and bounds.
Yeah, actually quite surprised how much he's come on from being on the sim. Okay, you've got a real mixture of sims. The ones we use are professional grade sims. That doesn't mean you have to spend thousands and thousands. Of course, the sky can be the limit with like a lot of these things out there, but you could get, if you spent £10,000, let's say, you get a really, really good simulator for that. Anything more, great, but you don't necessarily need it, let's say.
No, you tend to find if you spend a lot more, like the professional one that we use at Speedworks, it's the dedicated room and the massive screens and all that kind of stuff. The actual hardware isn't dissimilar. Yeah,
exactly, to what we have at home. That's the thing. Yeah, it's more immersive, isn't it?
Yeah,
I would say. And so maybe a little bit more feedback, but aside from that, you kind of gain the same stuff, especially if you're being coached on one. So as long as it's a certain level, you'll find you can gain an awful lot from a simulator.
Yes.
So I don't know if you wanted to sort of just to explain a little bit about what we do on the sim.
So generally, with a lot of the time,
what you could do on the sim.
What you could do on the sim is, first of all, from a car driving point of view, is understanding some of the limitations. So they're brilliant, and we've been talking about there are some simulators now that have gone to the next level of immersiveness, but the biggest thing with the sim is there's less feel than there is with the car, because you're not getting the cues that you get from your body moving around. But I say there is a simulator that's come out that goes a long way towards doing that, but we'll talk about that another day. So understanding the limitations of it from a driving point of view, first of all, and you always have to spend a little bit of time dialing into it, don't you? Because even if you're using sims, like the sim we have here and the sim we use for coaching, feel quite different even on the same programs.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you've got to dial into that
settings.
first.
There's so many program settings and so on. So you might even have exactly the same units, let's say direct drive, hydraulic pedals, all that kind of stuff. But if you've set it up slightly differently, it might have a slightly different feel. So just like hopping from one car manufacturer to another, it takes a little while to just dial in to those subtleties, I suppose.
So that's that. But from then on, what we do is pretty much like we would do at Millbrook, somewhere like that, really, where we want to try and build a foundation of technique for people, don't we? Because once you've got a framework, you can then start to work things. So for example, with driving, I often say to people that there's no ABC to it. You've got to work out how you apply what you know to each corner and each circuit and everything else. But there is still a foundation of a basis. And what we found with Millbrook, for example, is that you can isolate techniques and focus on individual bits. And you can do exactly the same on the sim. So you can look at braking, you can look at balancing the car, you can look at vision, you can look at being on the right line, and all of those things working exactly the same as they do in real life. But of course, with a sim, you can do it over and over and over again. So, for example, if somebody was going to do Monaco Historic, for example, you can't test at Monaco, but you can on a sim.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, exactly as you say, it's being able to isolate it. So you could do so many runs just focusing on braking technique and looking at data traces, overlapping. The other great useful tool, and you found this useful, was going from the outside of the car and watching a rerun, but not an onboard necessarily like you'd have in real life, watching it from all sorts of different angles. And you saved quite a bit of time doing that, didn't you? Just silly little things. Are you right up against white line before turning in? You might think you are, but are you?
No.
So there's lots of gains you can get there that you can't necessarily do so easily in real life as well. But yeah, isolating each technique, obviously looking at the data, those are absolutely key, aren't they?
They are. So there's that. There's then getting into the mental elements, and this is what it's also been really useful for, is getting somebody to the point where they can lap consistently. Even if it's not quite the ultimate pace, you get somebody doing the same things repetitively over and over again, so they get building that muscle memory and getting the consistent lapping. Then you can start to look where the improvements might be, because you make little changes to what they're doing and just get the little improvements together, and stop and analyse it and go over it and really dig into what people are thinking and feeling when they're driving. So you're looking for that consistency that you can, because once you understand why you're doing something, you can then start to build on it.
Absolutely.
If you don't know, if you're just doing it like, well, I'll brake now, we'll think, okay, how have we decided what
exactly.
where's that
why
point?
You're braking there? How
Let's
are you
go
braking?
Look. Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you can
All
start
that
to do that
stuff.
consistently with a
absolutely. And with the mental side, you can start creating pressure. So this obviously then starts to get more into people that actually are racing or want to race. So we're sort of moving away from perhaps people that are doing track days to them thinking about actually moving into the sport and competing. Then we can start doing, pushing on lap time in general, consistency, but analysing those thoughts and feelings as well as what somebody's actually thinking. Because it's amazing, if I sit next to somebody, even then when they're on a sim, it's amazing how self-conscious they'll be with me just there. And if I say, right, I want you to do 5 laps of this time, because of course you want to do it, you want to achieve it, you're competitive with yourself, and it's amazing how much that can, you can pick up on errors and just see kind of somebody's emotional state, can't you? And perhaps some of their weaknesses, and then start to look at that and hopefully build on that, because in competition 85% is up here in your mind. That's the thing. So it's not just technique. People think that it's learning tracks on a sim, general technique, but the mental performance is also a massive gain with a sim. The only thing you can't get so much, of course, is the fear factor. It's very easy to say to somebody, right, I want you to brake at the 50-meter board. Of course, in real life, you might think about that twice. On the sim, you'll probably just go for it and do it. But it is good for the general mental side, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So there's loads of stuff you can do with a sim, that you can then take away and use in real life situations.
Absolutely.
So it's a really useful tool.
So yeah, we do a lot of coaching on sims. Like I say, not really for people that want to do sim racing. If they do, great, that's a great alternative, but we use it to support people for track days or actually racing as well. So there's loads of different simulators out there, and you don't have to go and spend 10 grand if you don't want to. I started off with a PlayStation and play seat and just built it from there, and they're like, well, I think it was £150 for the seat and pedals and everything, and then the PlayStation. So, and you can just build it from there. Obviously, a PC is ideal because you have a lot more different programs on that than you do the PlayStation and the online racing and the data and that kind of thing. But you can, point being is you can build it up. You don't have to jump straight into the deep end with this stuff. But it is really, really useful and enjoyable. That's the other thing, isn't it?
It is good fun, yeah.
So, on to motorsport then.
So on to the real
leading
thing.
on to that. Yeah. So, of course, this time of year, well, it's been quiet up to now. Things are starting to kick off, aren't they?
Yeah.
And get going now. So there has been some talk on the F1 scene, hasn't there?
There has. So F1 kind of gets going in the next couple of weeks with testing, but there's been a load of doubt as to whether old Lewis is going to show up.
Yeah.
I'd never doubted it for a second, personally. I thought there's no way he's going to walk away.
No, he's not going to leave it in that situation.
I understand he was bruised and he was hurt and he probably didn't want to think about it.
We kind of disappeared off social media completely.
Yeah.
And then, this week, he put something on social media pretty much saying he's back. And I think he's just had to, have some time out from the sport in general and just get his head around things, what's happened, and now focus on 2022. But yeah, there's no way he's going to leave it and in that situation like that, on such a negative, when he's achieved all he has, there's just no way. So he's got a great team behind him, and I think he'd be mad to chuck that away right now.
Yeah. So, but the only person we don't know is going to be back or what's going to happen with him is Michael Massey, the race director.
Exactly. So anybody who watches F1 will have known what happened at the final round.
Yeah.
Michael Massey has had a lot of criticism. I mean, he was praised when he first came into the job, and then of course over the year there was a lot of inconsistency really with decisions, and we saw people like Fernando Alonso playing on that to see what reaction he would get. Drivers were noticing it, fans were noticing it, teams were noticing it. So the final round really wasn't good for Michael Massey, really.
No, and it's difficult really because you've got some incredibly bright people in Formula One who are also extraordinarily competitive, so they are going to pick up on weakness, and I think that's and what they didn't do was nip it in the bud with the team managers talking to him and things like that. But
I think that needs to stop. I don't think there should be too much communication between team directors, and of course Michael Massey or anybody else in that room making those decisions at the time. Appeal afterwards. But I do think that there's too much communication. And one thing that just sort of stood out to me is Michael Massey doesn't seem quite strong enough. When you've got that pressure, you've got millions of people watching worldwide, it comes down to you to make that decision. And then having that pressure from the teams directly at the same time, I just don't think is a good combination, honestly.
No. And it's been highlighted a bit that he's going to have to go because Jonathan Wheatley, for example, who's one of the big bosses at Red Bull, has pretty much said you can listen to him.
Yeah, exactly.
We're hoping we might get Jonathan on the
I've taken him out before, Jonathan Wheatley, and he's a
very bright bloke.
He's very successful, obviously at Red Bull. And it'd be nice to kind of have a chat with him and get more of his thoughts on. Of course, in a way, it worked out very well for them. So I'm sure he won't complain too much in some respects. But overall, it's been too inconsistent over the season. So who do you think would replace him? That's the thing.
I don't really know. I have no idea, to be honest.
Who would want the job, really?
No. Well, I think the trouble was that Charlie Whiting did such a good job and had everybody respected and listened to him. It was much only because he was Bernie's best mate, but it wasn't that. He was good at the job.
Exactly. I think you have to be so strong-minded and decisive under pressure, and I think Michael Massey has shown that weakness a little bit. And hey, I couldn't do it. I don't know how people do it, but I'm just not sure he's got quite the
and they don't use in the frame. I mean, we said when with the stewards, it's funny really. With the steward's decision, if it was a dodgy decision, we could almost pick out who the steward was.
Yeah, and we won't mention names, but yes, a certain steward in particular.
A certain steward would be. It was like
it's funny,
and it was always the same steward, wasn't it?
And you think
I'm not going to say who it is.
that's not necessarily
we
a
might
good
have him
sign.
on the pod one day, but
so, better not say anything.
No.
So lots going on there. So we'll have to see what happens. Obviously, it's not far off. Testing will begin, so we'll see what happens with Michael Massey. I'm pretty sure Lewis Hamilton will definitely be behind the wheel. I can't see why he wouldn't at this point. I think that's a safe bet. But on to the World Endurance Championship. We've mentioned this a bit last year, didn't we?
Yes.
How this is going to be kind of one of the pinnacle years for sports car racing, really.
Yes, because there's been the first round at IMSA, hasn't there? There's been the Daytona 24 Hours.
Yeah, which is always spectacular to watch, to be fair.
Yes, which was won by what's the IndyCar team that Jack Harvey's driving for?
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Myers Shank.
Myers
Shank won it with Helio Castroneves, amongst others.
Yeah.
But P2 was the one that was interesting to me. That was won by one with all the young IndyCar drivers in it. So Pato Ward and Colton Herter and that's a strong old team, that one.
What it does highlight is how strong the IndyCar drivers are.
Yes.
When you put them in the world scene like that with all sorts of drivers, from ex-F1 drivers across the board. And you just see how strong these young up-and-coming guys are in IndyCar. They're unbelievable.
Because Colton Herter and Jimmy Johnson went really well in the Race of Champions at the weekend as well, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think the Solbergs won it, didn't they?
Did
Father
they?
and son Solbergs,
Not surprised. I haven't actually seen that, so I have to see that. We'll chat more about that on the next pod, because I absolutely love the Race of Champions. I went to Paris one year to see it, and it's such a good event to go and see, because it's very friendly. Obviously, you see, world-class drivers, but doing lots of different disciplines. It really highlights. Do you remember that time with Sebastian Vettel? and he was doing some sort of like donuts around cones and all sorts of stuff. And he was amazing. And then they had these amateurs do it. And then you realise how hard it is when you see them do it. But yeah, it's lovely to see their true talent, because of course when you're watching things like Formula One, or in some respects World Endurance Championship, these cars have so much area, you can't always appreciate, unless you've done it, how hard it is. And I think going and watching something like the Race of Champions and all these different disciplines, it is amazing how good their car control is, their feel, how adaptable they are from one car to another as well. So I'll definitely like to watch that.
Yes. So we got off the point a bit there. But
Sorry.
So no, that's all right. So the WEC, so there's 39 cars registered. Obviously, there's more cars at Le Mans.
So that's a record grid, isn't it?
Yes, and they capped it. So some people had their entries a few. So the top one, which is supposed to be for the manufacturers, a few people couldn't get into that.
Yeah.
Because we've now got class.
Yeah, so we've now got Chevy back, haven't we?
Ferrari,
Porsche.
And we're hoping people like Lambo are going to join in that, and Bentley.
Well, certainly tying it into Formula One, I mean, there's been budget caps in F1, so certainly for those manufacturers, they've got extra money to spend. For the wealthy manufacturers, so it makes sense to go off and do sports car racing. I mean, it's been great.
Ferrari have got a car coming out, haven't they? Because Ferrari, you think Ferrari was spending 400-500 million doing F1. Now they can't spend that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll do something else with it then.
Yeah, so it's making it so much stronger and even more competitive. So yeah, there's going to be all sorts of different teams, manufacturers in it. And I just think this is going to be the prime time to really get into sports car racing. If you haven't already, or you did in the past, definitely go back to it, because it's I think it's going to be a very special year for sure. It's also going to be 2 all-female teams as well, with a very young 16-year-old as well. So that would be nice to see, because I just think, not that saying you have to have all-female teams, but it's just nice to see when there's obviously such a big grid and predominantly guys, that there's support out there for that as well. So that starts March, doesn't it?
Yes, middle of March.
So pretty much like everything else, really. So we're going to move on now. Over the winter period, we were asked a lot of questions from the general public. So we just selected a few. We don't know if we're going to carry this on. We might do. We're going to start mixing up the pod with some different things anyway. But yeah, we thought we'd just mention a few on here that might be useful in general to people, because they're quite frequently asked, aren't they, by quite a few people. So the first one was about wanting to get into racing. What do you do? How do you get into it, really?
Yeah, and so it depends on. So we had 3 or 4 people ask this by email and things like that, and it depends obviously how much money you've got to spend. I suppose it's probably the first thing.
Age.
And how old you are in it, absolutely. So because obviously there's lots of different ways you can go, but the first thing I would do is probably get yourself along to a race meeting.
Yeah.
So you can give an idea. There's lots of things you can do. Like we work a lot with the Porsche Club. So there's the Porsche Club, there's MX-5s, there's Formula 4s. There's so much. It depends on what you want to do and where you want to go. So my advice would be to go get yourself along to a couple of club race meetings. Don't go to a touring car meeting or a Grand Prix. I mean, do, but you won't learn anything about what you want to know there.
Yeah.
Go to a little club meeting and see what's the Alfa Romeo Club doing, what's the MG Car Club doing, things like that, and just see what's around.
Yeah, and then from that point, would be doing some track days, because you don't need to have a race license for that.
No.
See how you like it, or perhaps you've already done some track days, and then really start looking at what you could use as a car, different formulas, as you mentioned, and then getting your ARDS license as well, so your race license. So once you've got that competition license, then you know you can compete. And then it's looking at, a formula that or a series that suits your budget, really. It does come down to money, sadly, because motorsport isn't the cheapest thing to get into, but it doesn't mean you have to spend a fortune either. Obviously, the most publicised series out there are very expensive, but there's some great club formulas, whether you want to do single-seaters like Formula Ford, or you want to do saloons, there's plenty of options out there. So yeah, it's not a particularly black and white answer because of that. If it's for youngsters looking into it who want to actually make a career of it, it's a little bit different. A lot of people think they have to have karted. I wouldn't say you have to. Yes, it's great to have done something in the past, just to help with that general kind of feel and feedback for something. But yeah, karting isn't, for me, essential, I would say, because you can get stuck in it too long, and also people don't always transfer over to cars very well from karts. It's quite a different technique in some ways. So now more than ever, you're seeing youngsters move out of karts very quickly now, very young, into cars. So I think the sooner you can get into cars, the better if you want to make a career of it. I think that's far more important than going onto the world stage in karting, honestly. So yeah, there's lots and lots of different answers out there, but I would do a bit of research, like Rich says, go to some meetings, think about your race license, and obviously we're here if you want any specific advice, really. So other questions were, well, we get this all the time as well. So purchased a high performance car, how do I learn to drive it properly? We get asked that a lot.
We do, which is kind of why we started to do more and more at Millbrook, isn't it? Because you need to go somewhere where you can explore things in safety, I suppose. Really.
Yeah. Now we do a lot on track as well. So we do a lot of track days, one-to-one tuition, events, that kind of thing. But the great thing with a proving ground is you can literally isolate one thing and the next thing, and you can go to different areas. So it's not just one track. You've got lots of different facilities that are available for use, and you can use it on your own as well. So it makes it a little bit safer, puts you at ease, especially if it's in your own car as well, to really look at these specific techniques. So that the foundations we mentioned earlier, really, like with the sim, it's kind of looking at all of that, isn't it? And then building it from there. So then when you go to a track, if that's what you want to do next, you feel like you've got those foundations in place, you know what you need to work on, and then you build it from there on the track days with other people around you. Of course, we'd always recommend more coaching, doing what we do, but naturally it does help, doesn't it? It makes a big difference, hopefully keeps you safer at the same time. Yeah, so we would say Millbrook. There are other facilities out there. Obviously, there are quite a few worldwide, but in the UK, it's a little bit more limited, isn't it? Because so much land's being sold for property now. They have noise problems and stuff. So hence why we use that. But yeah, there's lots of, basically just look online, you'll see there's quite a few options there. So the next one, again, we've been asked this a lot. What would be a good track car? So
well, we've had this lot because of for nice reasons. If it's you, where somebody's got quite an expensive car, because insurance has become more and more of an issue on track. So it's a question of getting something that is a little bit less precious, I suppose. Still, it depends how much money you want to spend. But
yeah,
with track cars, really, you want something that's fairly well balanced and isn't particularly heavy. So we looked at things like MX-5s, GT86s, older sort of Boxers and Caymans, stuff like that are sort of good, agile cars. Parts aren't too bad for them. It's not going to wear everything out because it's heavy. So stuff like that. I mean, again, how big's your budget and how far do you want to go with it? But they're kind of they're sort of 3 or 4 of the ones that we would recommend mostly, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't have to spend a fortune. A lot of it is for people to save money, because we know somebody who's got a Ferrari who looked at insuring that, and what was the excess? It was
it's 40 odd grand.
Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
And it starts to get to a point where you think, well, actually, perhaps I should just use that on the road, and I'll have something else if I'm going to do a lot of track days. So yeah, you can have a little Mazda MX-5. There's so many different options out there. Don't have to spend a fortune. There is maybe a few things that you'd want to check, so brakes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you'll find most cars, if they're already light and focused a bit for performance, in general, they probably won't need a lot doing to them before using on track. So it can make it a bit more cost effective and more enjoyable, because you're less worried about, let's say, the outcome of an expensive car, let's say. But yeah, again, if you want more advice, obviously you can be more specific directly when we know your actual circumstances, let's say. So yeah, the final one, we did have quite a few, but we just thought 4's easily enough for now. So what's the best beginner track circuit for starting track days, really? Yeah,
so this is something we talk about quite a lot. So places like, and it's not an obvious one, somewhere like Goodwood, because it's actually quite a simple track. The problem with Goodwood is when you get to the point of going a bit quicker, there's not a lot of runoff and things like that. But actually, as a starting point, it isn't a bad place to go. There's always very limited traffic.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly difficult circuit to learn, and it's a very friendly, nice place to go and visit. So somewhere like Goodwood, if you're down in the south, I guess.
Yeah.
And up north, really, I mean, Silverstone's pretty good.
Yeah.
Grand Prix track, not so much, but national circuit perhaps, or international circuit.
Yeah, national circuit's perfect starting
Yeah.
point. Not too many corners, lovely and wide. It's pretty flat. Reasonable amount of runoff everywhere. So yeah, a really good starting point.
Yeah, and Donington's not bad. Donington's it's got quite technical bits, Donington, and it's got the cranes, which is not for the faint-hearted. So
no, but
it's all right. But it's not like going to Cadwell where you need to know what you're doing. And
exactly, because some circuits basically just don't have much runoff, and they're not very forgiving. So you have to be very accurate.
Yes.
Whereas other circuits, yes, you're trying to be accurate, but it's not necessarily the end of the world if you're not. So for a beginner, you just want something a bit more friendly. The other one I was going to mention, it isn't actually a race circuit. It's been designed for track days. Is Bedford Autodrome. It's actually a really big circuit. Sometimes they separate it to multiple smaller circuits, but you can use the big. Do they call it the GT circuit? I think
the full
it is.
thing, yeah, Gran Turismo, yeah.
Yeah, and that can be brilliant. You've got a mixture of hairpin, chicanes, quick corners, slow ones. So it's really good basis, very flat, loads of runoff. Again, run very well. So for me, depending on where you're located, that would be the number one start circuit to try for me personally, just because it's been designed for that really, and then build it from there. But all the other circuits Rich has mentioned are also really good starting points, because you might not want to go all the way to Bedford for it. But yeah, so that's what we would recommend ultimately. So really then, from Friday, we're going to start releasing some guest podcasts. So watch out for that. We've got, again, we've mentioned obviously people that we've got coming on. I've already recorded some anyway, but we've also got Louise Goodman coming on. We're going to have a chat with Graham Glue about Formula Woman, and it's basically the finalists that have got through in the competition, what's happening next. So they'll be doing, McLaren Drive, won't they? In not British GT Cup, that's it.
Yeah.
So talking to them and finding out a bit more about how that's going as well. So yeah, lots to look forward to. So keep an eye from Friday onwards for that. If you want to ask us any advice, then just drop a line, or you can visit our website, velocedriving.com, and yeah, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.